The morning I found the crack, my daughter had already stopped breathing once. I just didn't know it yet. Let me take you back to the beginning, or at least, to what I thought was the beginning. My name isn't important. What matters is this: 3 months after our son Elias was born, small, early, and fighting for everything, an old woman who lived across the hall knocked on our apartment door. Her name was Mrs. Osei. She had lived in that building for 40 years. She brought us soup when my wife couldn't stand. She sat with me in the hospital corridor without saying a word, which was exactly what I needed. She was that kind of person. So when she arrived one afternoon carrying something wrapped in brown cloth, tied with a length of dark cord, I smiled and opened the door wide. "For the child," she said quietly. "For keeping." Inside was an egg. Not an ordinary one. It was hand-painted, dense, deliberate marks covering every surface in rust, charcoal, and a color I can only describe as old blood. The symbols weren't decorative. They felt like a language that no longer had speakers. My wife Adiz took one look at it and went very still. She told me later, in bed, voice low, her aunt had warned her about objects like this. That in certain traditions, certain things are made not for the living, not quite. A newborn, she said, exists in a kind of threshold. Not fully here. Not fully gone from wherever they came. And there are objects that speak to that. Objects that reach into that in-between. I told her she was exhausted. I told her we both were. I put the egg on the kitchen windowsill, out of reach, out of mind, and by the next day I'd forgotten it was there. 8 days later, I woke up at 3:14 in the morning. Not from a sound. Not from a dream. Just awake. Completely, suddenly awake, the way your body sometimes decides for you. I lay still for a few seconds, listening to the silence of the apartment. The silence was wrong. I don't know how else to explain it. There are kinds of quiet that feel like rest, and then there is a quiet that feels like something has been paused. Like the world is holding its breath and waiting to see what you do next. I got up, walked down the hall. Elias's door was closed. No sound from inside. New parents learn to read silence the way sailors read the sky. That silence, the total, unmoving silence coming through that door, was not the silence of a sleeping child. I knew it before I touched the handle. I knew it the way you know things when your body understands something your mind refuses to. I opened the door and crossed the room in 2 steps and pressed my hand flat against his chest. Nothing. 1 second. 2. And then he gasped, a full body shudder, like something snapping back into place, and started crying. The ordinary, furious, beautiful crying of a woken infant. I sank to the floor. I stayed there a long time. My wife found me still on the carpet when she came in 20 minutes later. The doctors had no explanation. Oxygen levels normal. Muscle tone normal. No underlying condition. One of them said, and I remember his exact phrasing, "Sometimes they pause." He said it like it was nothing. Like it was weather. We brought Elias home. I walked into the kitchen. And I saw the egg. There was a crack in it. A hairline fracture running from the very top to the base, clean and deliberate, like something had pressed outward from inside. Nothing had been near it. No draft. No movement. Nothing. What made it worse, what I couldn't stop looking at, was the symbols nearest the crack. I had spent enough time staring at that egg to know their positions. The marks that had faced outward now faced in. Toward the center. Toward whatever was inside. I put it in a bag. I drove to the park down the road. I buried it under the roots of an old oak tree at the far edge, away from the path, as deep as I could dig with my hands. Mrs. Osei moved out the following week. No notice, no goodbye. When I asked the building super about a forwarding address, he looked at me the way people look when they're deciding whether you're worth the effort of the truth. "She never mentioned you," he said. "Elias is 3 now. He runs. He laughs at things I don't understand. He has his mother's stubbornness and his own particular way of being alive that I am grateful for every single day. But I drove past that park last autumn. Someone had planted a bench near the old oak. The roots had come up, shifted, exposed, the way old roots do when they grow toward something. I didn't stop. I kept driving. But I've thought about it every day since. About what it was reaching for. About whether burying something is the same as ending it. About whether certain objects don't die. They just wait. About the fact that Elias has started sleeping badly again. That some mornings the monitor shows long stretches of silence I can't account for. About the crack that faced inward. About what was inside.
The smoke was supposed to find the guilty man. Instead, it found the truth. And that was so much more dangerous. I was 17 when Pastor Dunladi performed the smoke reading in our community hall. I know how that sounds now. But you have to understand, in a place like Kure Junction, a small town carved out of red dust and old loyalties, that man's word was closer to law than anything printed in a courthouse. He had been there longer than the tarred road. Longer than the telephone lines. He had buried people's parents. He had named their children. When he spoke, you didn't question, you leaned in. It started because of a fire. Someone had burned down the feed store belonging to the Nwosu family in the middle of the night. No one was hurt, but the building was gone, and with it, everything the family had stored for the dry season. The town wanted someone to blame. Pastor Dunladi said he had a way to find them. He called it the old reading. He said his grandfather's grandfather had brought it from somewhere further north, that it had been used to settle disputes for generations. You burned incense mixed with particular herbs over a clay bowl. The smoke, he said, would curl toward the one carrying hidden guilt. God's own finger, pointing. I was there because my father was one of the elders. I sat in the back row and watched. The hall smelled of wood smoke and something sharper, something medicinal that made your eyes water and your thoughts go a little slow. About 20 men sat in a rough circle. The accused was a young man named Chukwu. He was 23. He was from outside town, had arrived 2 years earlier to work on a construction project and never left. He had no family in Kure Junction, no one who would make noise if something happened to him. I noticed that. Even at 17, I noticed that. Pastor Dunladi lit the bowl. The smoke rose, thin, white, almost beautiful. Every person in that room went completely still. I could hear the ceiling fan clicking overhead. I could hear someone's sandal shifting against the concrete floor. Then the smoke moved. Slowly. Deliberately. Not toward Chukwu. It drifted to the left, thickening as it went, and curled, unmistakably, lazily, toward the far side of the circle. Toward Elder Sabo, the man who owned the feed store's biggest competitor. The man who had personally recommended Chukwu for the construction work, then publicly argued with him over unpaid wages just 3 weeks before the fire. The room didn't erupt. It went quieter. That particular silence that happens when something true lands somewhere no one wanted it to land. Pastor Dunladi let the smoke settle for exactly 4 seconds. I counted. Then he said a window must be open somewhere. He said the draft was interfering. He walked to the far wall, checked 2 windows that were already closed, and came back. He relit the bowl. The smoke moved toward Elder Sabo again. What I saw on Pastor Dunladi's face in that moment, I have thought about it for 15 years. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't fear. It was the look of a man doing a quick calculation. The same expression you might see on someone deciding whether to pick up a coin they've spotted on the ground when they think no one is watching. He chose. He announced that Chukwu's guilt was so powerful it had warped the reading. That sin of that magnitude distorted the smoke the way heat distorts air above a road. It was sophisticated. It was fast. And every elder in that room let out a breath they'd been holding and nodded, because the alternative, the real answer, would have cost them something. Chukwu left town that night. Quietly. The kind of leaving that feels more like erasure. I heard he went east. I never heard anything after that. Elder Sabo donated a new generator to the church the following month. He said it was a thank you to God for clearing his family's name. I left Kure Junction at 20. I told myself I left for school, for work, for the world outside that red dust. That was true. But it wasn't all of it. What I couldn't stop seeing, what I still can't stop seeing, was not the smoke. It was the 4 seconds. The way Pastor Dunladi stood perfectly still, watching the smoke point at the wrong man, and used those 4 seconds to build a story that would serve everyone in that room except the one who needed it most. That's what they never tell you about rituals like that. The fire doesn't lie. The smoke doesn't lie. The herbs and the heat and the air currents, they have no reason to. The only liar in the room was the man holding the flame. And he had been holding it for 30 years.
The fire was spreading and the woman next to me was smiling. Not despite it. Because of it. That was the moment I understood I was in real danger. I need to tell you something about the kind of person I was before this happened. I wasn't a believer, but I wasn't a mocker either. I respected faith the way you respect something ancient and large, carefully, from a distance. I had covered floods, elections, a courthouse collapse. I thought I knew how to stay calm inside chaos. I was wrong about that. The ceremony was held at the Shrine of the Eternal Flame, a pilgrimage site I won't name precisely, because the people there deserve that much from me. It draws thousands every year during the height of the dry season. Pilgrims arrive days early. They sleep on the courtyard stones. They fast. By the time the ceremony begins, they have already given so much of themselves that what remains is something stripped raw and open, something I didn't know how to be in the same room with. I arrived at dawn as a journalist. Press credential on a lanyard. Notebook in my shirt pocket. I told myself I was an observer, neutral, clinical, separate from the thing I was documenting. That separation lasted about 40 minutes. The courtyard filled faster than I expected. Bodies pressed from every direction. Old men in white, women in layers of cloth, children passed forward over the crowd like offerings. The smell was incense and sweat and something older underneath, something I associate now with old stone and low oxygen. The sun climbed. The temperature climbed with it. I took notes. I kept my elbows out to hold a little space around me. Then the chanting started. Low and rhythmic and so synchronized it didn't sound like individuals at all. It sounded like the building itself finding a frequency. The courtyard walls seemed to lean in. The crowd moved forward in one slow pulse. Not a decision, not a choice, just a tide. My feet lifted from the ground for a half second and I grabbed the arm of a stranger without thinking and he grabbed mine back without looking. That was when the torches came out. Hundreds of them, lit from a central flame, passed hand to hand through the crowd. Beautiful, I wrote in my notebook. Dangerous, I thought but didn't write. The fire moved faster than it should have in that density of people, jumping from torch to cloth to hair, small flares that people beat out quickly without breaking the chant, without flinching. I heard a sound to my right. Not a prayer sound. A man had gone down. Not fallen, folded, slowly, the way bodies go when the legs just stop cooperating. The crowd above him didn't scatter. It compressed. Someone stepped. I know because I felt the shift, that sick dropping weight on one side when a body disappears beneath a standing group. I started moving toward the edge. Not walking. Pushing. Using my shoulders and my elbows and whatever else I had. And that was when I saw her face. Eerie, the woman beside me, pressed so close I could feel her breathing, had her eyes closed and her face turned upward. Her cheek had a small burn mark on it, fresh and red. A spark had caught her. She hadn't noticed. Or she had noticed and decided it meant something good. Her lips were moving. Her expression was the purest peace I have ever seen on a human face. Around her, people were stumbling. Someone was crying out. The air was getting thick and wrong. And she was somewhere else entirely. I got out. I found the edge of the crowd and a low wall and I climbed it and sat on the other side and shook for a long time. 3 people were treated for burns that day. 1 man was hospitalized for heat and compression. I wrote my article. It ran on page 7. Error what I never wrote, what I couldn't figure out how to explain in a newspaper. was the thing that actually frightened me. Not the fire. Not the man on the ground. It was the look on her face. That total, unshakable peace while everything around her was going wrong. She wasn't ignoring the danger. She had simply placed herself somewhere the danger couldn't follow. She had made herself unreachable. I used to think that was weakness, delusion, a failure to see clearly. But I have thought about her face almost every day for 3 years. In traffic, at the doctor, at 3 a.m. when the things I can't control feel very large and very close. And I'm no longer sure which one of us was more afraid. I'm no longer sure which one of us was right.